On today's episode, we are interviewing with Matthias Smith. And I'm going to tell you, when you start getting into the SBA side of the business and you start getting into the weeds and the changes and all of these things, this guy really knows his stuff because he's not just a banker. He worked for banks, but really has a massive following on X all around how to do SBA, home equity lines and things like that. And he's gone off on his own, helping over 95 people in the last couple of years. I really think that this was one of those podcasts you want to dive in and listen to. So Ben, what were your thoughts?
I think it was interesting. I thought it was going to be another banker. Let's talk about SBA. We've done that on a couple podcasts already. And I think, but it really took a cool turn because he's really an entrepreneur too. Yeah. He started his own company, went out on his own, had some challenges. So I think that we kind of dive into that on today's episode. And then I think the other thing too is the power of X, which is formerly Twitter for those that don't know what we're talking about, and how he's leveraging that in this SBA M&A searcher space and educating people out there. And I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah, knowing these little details about how to finance your business, right? These little caveats will keep you out of problems. And it sounds like, he's the right guy to reach out to if you have questions or whatever you need to help you structure it before it ever goes to a banker. Absolutely gold podcast. Jump right in.
Love it.
Hey there, this is Casey with the M&A Launchpad podcast. I want to let you know about October 25th. Put it on your calendar. This is a do not miss one day event. There's going to be incredible headliners, but really at the end of the day, you're going to get a chance to talk to people that have made acquisitions, learn from some of the challenges that they've made, because this is definitely a challenging process. But more importantly, there's going to be people there that can help you and support you along the way, from great vendors, quality of earnings, how to run the due diligence process, and how do I get financed? How do I raise capital? How do I structure all of these things? October 25th in Chicago, we're going to be gathering. It's going to be hundreds of people that are all focused, like-minded people. And man, everyone that's come has given us incredible feedback. So mark your calendar, October 25th in Chicago. We look forward to seeing you. Hey, Matthias, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you today.
Casey, Ben, thanks for having me on. Definitely appreciate the opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love what you're doing. My background is in the SBA side. Several hundreds of millions of loans that I've placed in that. I've taken some myself, so I know the game. We're excited about to have you. So why don't you go in and tell us a little bit about your background and tell us about your company?
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. One of the guys on my team, Raphael, actually went to the M&A Launchpad conference back in May in Houston, had amazing things to say. And that was kind of the tie-in here with reaching out. But to give you my background, so I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm currently sitting in a Marriott, a Lofts hotel room in Dallas, Texas, here for just a M&A networking cocktail appetizers thing with Kevin Henderson at S&B Law Group and Chris Barrett over at Midwest CPA. But my background, Casey and Ben, is I started in the SBA lending space back right out of college. So went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, graduated from there back in December of 2014, got into the SBA lending space, working as a middle office kind of desk jockey of sorts, facilitating deals from the time they got approved through closing and funding. Started in that space back in March of 2015 and spent about 7 years and 2 months working at 4 different banks. So was at Live Oak Bank for half a year back in 2021 as a closer. There worked in their SBA division, so basically ETA, search fund lending type deals. Also worked on their sponsor finance team too, so kind of upmarket, bigger deals with independent sponsor groups. Nice. Spent three and a half years working at a bank called Byline Bank, so another kind of big bank in the SBA space. There worked on everything from people trying to buy a decrepit bar near Wrigley Field in Chicago to people buying self-storage in Florida, and kind of things across the gamut. And then worked at 2 banks based in Wisconsin, one called First Bank Financial Center, so a bank that mostly did owner-occupied commercial real estate. So anything from someone building a gun range in Pennsylvania to people building Culver's QSR restaurants in Illinois, buying out the building that they're leasing from their landlord for their manufacturing business in Wisconsin. And then lots of gas station deals. The guy, Casey, that I actually got my start with, working at First Bank Financial Center, His name was Brent Benjamin. He was like the gas station lending czar in South Central Wisconsin. So that just completely random fact there. And then most recently was a bank based in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I live now, a bank called First Business Bank. And so that was my last bank before going off and starting Pioneer. Would it help for me just kind of give the story with starting Pioneer and kind of all
Absolutely,
that?
man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the last bank I was at First Business Bank. The day I started that bank, I got a DM on LinkedIn from an attorney that I used to work with before at Live Oak and Byline. This guy named Scott Oliver, who's a partner at a law firm called Lewis and Kappas based in Indianapolis. And so Scott reached out and said, hey, Matthias, congrats on your new job. Wish you all the best of luck, man. Hey, by the way, here's a space on Twitter of all these people looking to buy these small to medium-sized businesses. And he said, even though your job isn't sales and you're a middle office guy, you're pretty good on social media. You should go on Twitter and put content out there to educate these buyers on how to go through the SBA financing process for acquisitions. And basically to kind of put knowledge out there just to be helpful, but also to help your bank drum up business. So I thought to myself, why not see what I can do to help the team at my new bank? So I just started pumping content on Twitter, basically pounding the drum, putting out stuff on anything from this is how you take out a home equity line of credit that's not drawn on to leverage your house over 75%, to avoid pledging it on an SBA loan, to this is what banks want to see in an acquisition management plan and projection, and topical content kept along those lines. And so over the 2 months I was at my last bank, Casey and Ben, between March and May of 2022, I sent my bank $15 million of at-bats from people I was meeting on Twitter over the DMs. And what ended up happening was halfway through my time at my bank, I made the mistake of retweeting a tweet from the bank's Twitter, which was dumb looking back in retrospect. And so my head of marketing at the bank found my Twitter, since she ran the Twitter profile at the bank. And so she started reading through my feed on HELOC, House Shield, this and that, et cetera, holes in my bank's have compliance. And so you guys can probably guess where this conversation's going.
Oh, yeah.
Long story short, they reached out to me, asked to hop on a video call, and they basically said, we love your enthusiasm about business buying SBA financing, but due to the fact that this is a publicly traded bank, we have to rein in a little bit here. And so essentially they're asking me was to run my stuff by them first before posting it. So I thought this was kind of silly at the time, just me being me. So I put a disclaimer at the top of my profile, basically to try to make it arm's length in nature. And I just said, everything I'm posting on my Twitter is my own views and not representative of my bank. So I kept posting, kept meeting people, kept saying leads to the bank. And kind of around the same time, I was observing from afar, folks like the S&B Law Group guys basically spinning up their thing, and others as well in the financial due diligence space and similar. And so I kind of saw this movement of people out of corporate America to work as service providers to help these acquisition entrepreneurs with going through this process. And so I get to my 2-month review, and leading up to this, I constantly have my direct manager and my head of compliance hitting my LinkedIn profile, basically looking over my social media like a hawk. And so I get to my 2-month review, first week of May of 2022, and my boss basically says, you're kicking ass at your job. Everyone likes working with you, but we need you off of Twitter, or we need you to stop posting about banking and SBA, because there's a concern from upper management at First Business Bank that if someone's deal goes sideways on Twitter, they're going to point back to your profile and basically say, your guy told us to do this, and it's going to be our fault. So at that point, I got it, it clicked, right? They don't want me to do this. I work at this bank. I just have to live with this. But right after this 2-month review, just from a timing circumstance, I had this trip planned to Greece with my wife for 2 weeks. And so we go to Athens, Santorini, Crete, then back to Athens. And while I'm in Greece with my wife, I'm thinking to myself, here's this market of all these people that want to buy these enduringly profitable small to medium-sized businesses, the same ones that you guys meet at your conference and similar. And I thought, my bank, if you kind of look at the fact they've made the business decision to not let me be active on Twitter to try to drum up business, if you zoom out from a macro level, they might end up getting passed in the market by banks that are more entrepreneurial, ones like First Business Bank, Live Oak Bank, and similar. and where they're letting their lenders kind of take advantage of this. And so I thought, I don't want to work at this bank. What are my other options? So I thought option one, I go to a different bank, I get the same job somewhere else, but then you never know what bag of goods you're getting sold until you ultimately end up going there. And so I thought, I don't really want to do that. And so I thought, what does it look like if I want to kind of live and work in and around this space and just be very active in the social media community, LinkedIn, Twitter, search funder? And so back when I'd been a closer or a middle office guy at these banks, Ben, Casey, most of the banks I worked with, the deals that I worked on as a closer came from referral sources or from loan brokers or loan consultants. And many of these people were old guys, 60s, 70s, some of them three-piece suits, where many of them had come from like a sales background, but none of them really knew the inner workings of the banks. And so I thought, having worked at these 4 different banks and seeing like the under the hood of how the cookie ultimately gets baked and understanding the logistical piece, coupled with having stayed in touch with the lenders I'd worked with at these banks as they'd gone to different institutions, since many loan officers don't stay at the same bank forever, they hop around a bit. And then that kind of coupled with the fact that this market in the business buying space was just taking off like a rocket around this time, and that banks in the space, with the exception of, small community banks, and then also Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, and Bank of America, most of these SBA banks will pay referral fees to firms that send deals to them, banks like Live Oak Bank, Huntington Bank, and many others. I thought, why not take the dragon by its tail or the bull by its horns and build a business plan around the thesis of helping these entrepreneurs in this Twitter social media ecosystem with going through the SBA acquisition financing process. And so that was a spark that really lit the idea behind Pioneer Capital Advisory. So this is middle of May of 2022. I think it was May 16th was when I incorporated. And so since that time, we've built a system or team kind of almost analogous or mirror-like to the same way the banks have their structure from a human capital infrastructure, where it's almost an assembly line of sorts, where we have 2 sales personnel, currently Raphael and Alan on my team, where they'll take sales calls, they'll learn about the acquisition entrepreneur's transaction or the business that they're buying, we'll sign an engagement letter with them, and then from there it goes to a team of 3 analysts. We have Pablo, our head of credit, Fernanda, and Ramiro, where they'll put together a deal deck that ultimately has sources and uses, cash flow analysis, a background on the acquisition entrepreneur, a background in the industry, and then a discussion of why the buyer's background makes sense for the deal. And then we take that and then we pitch it out to the ocean of banks, specifically the ones that we think will be a good fit for the deal. And then from that point forward, my chief operating officer, Valerie Sash, who sits in Indianapolis, basically kind of acts as the account manager or liaison of sorts between the acquisition entrepreneur and the banks to help the transaction go smoothly from underwriting all the way through to closing. And so we've been fortunate enough to work with 95 people in the last 3 years and 2 months to go through this process, but it's been a fun ride.
Well, that's, that is good stuff. I think it's interesting because, I think I was thinking that this podcast was kind of going to go like, what about SBA and how does SBA work? But I think it's interesting because you're also starting a company too, right? And what goes into the growth of that. And it just happens to be in the SBA space too. So, I'm just going to just go off script here. What has been some of the challenges, and the other thing that I wanted to piggyback to this too, because you mentioned it and I'm a big Twitter fan as well. How are you leveraging Twitter to grow your business? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs really need to get comfortable with more and more things are happening online and social media, and you just have to adopt it, regardless if you don't like it or not. It's just part of doing business these days, right?
First off, they just made the change from Twitter to X now.
Yes.
So I have been forced on my app to get off Twitter. So just let you know, that's our first step to all the entrepreneurs.
Once you update, I remember there was a moment, Casey, you update the app and you have the little Twitter bird. It changes to X and it's gone. You can't go back.
You can't go back. And it forced me yesterday.
You can't go back.
You're no longer a Twitter user.
You have to do the X. You had to, and I bit that bullet about a couple of years ago. But but all right. So maybe let's start with what's been some of the challenges along growing this new firm, right? Which is an incredible journey that you've had over the last 2 years. Or excuse me, 3. And then also, again, how are you leveraging the social media? Because I think that's important for entrepreneurs to hear that too, right? I mean, obviously you're listening to us on a podcast, so we know the power of some of these things, but I think Twitter, I mean, I follow a lot of these same people that you're even mentioning, on Twitter. And I think that there's a lot going on there too. So.
So the biggest challenges that I've had, so kept segueing back to what I saw back when I started Pioneer, was how lots of people were kept doing this on a standalone basis, but in KC, is that there weren't any firms that I was acutely aware of where they built this type of business like on a larger scale. It was lots of people doing these kind of on a one-off basis, like say you, KC, pure hypothetical, or like a fractional CFO type, and people looking for SBA financing, you'd send them to the banks and you'd be involved as possible, is trying to figure out like what should the actual architecture look like from a people standpoint for this type of business. And then what should each of the people be doing in those defined roles? What are those KPIs? Where do you find those people? So like, what's the avatar of the type of person that you're trying to hire for? And then the good people that know SBA well, for example, my chief operating officer, Valerie, where they have lots of options or banks they could go to, how do you pitch those people on taking a flyer to come work for you? So that I'd say has been one of the biggest challenges. And then Kev, along the way, going through different iterations of Pioneer, like V1 or like V1 1.0 or 1.1.1 was just me. And then I had 3 people working for me in the Philippines. That didn't work, so I wound that down. Then last year I had 1 guy that was working for me basically as a sales associate, account manager of sorts. That ultimately didn't work because I just sucked at trading him, and there's other issues too. And so now we're on like 1.9, version 1.9. Mm-hmm. And like I feel like we have version 1.9 well built out. And now it's like, how do we scale version 1.9 to 2.4 or whatnot? So
I'll tell you, man, being somebody that had, did this in my business, right? Focused completely on commercial financing. With all of the tools now to automate a lot of this stuff, I think your business can get extremely even more efficient just by using the tools that are out there now. Having a pipeline, being able to respond in email. I'll tell you, when we work with SBA banks, I think one of the hardest problems is that they never tell you what stage they're on, right? It's like, they're like, hey, the commitment is coming. And you're like, well, when is the commitment coming? And they're like, well, it's coming.
Isn't that all lenders? I feel like
you're like,
I feel like it's always a black box.
So why wouldn't you just,
I feel like part of that bet not to pop in is a little bit intentional, right? Like they kind of, there's a bit of a game there, right? So,
and it's like, it's all these things you deal with when you work through these banks, where I think from a broker standpoint, right, being that advisor or whatever you want to call it, you could almost be that guy that takes that, all of that communication and automate it. And then they don't care about the bank. The bank's just your funding source. So, and I'm sure you're probably doing a lot of that, but that's kind of the stuff that I thought about with some of the stuff I was doing. And the stuff that we do here is just figuring out how to automate it, where you can reduce some of the redundancies and the follow-ups and the communication.
The people that adopt that more quickly, right, are the ones that are going to be successful. I think in this really it's this new phase of our economy, right? I mean, and we could throw out the cliche AI and all this stuff, but that's real, and it's getting smarter every day. And I think the quicker that you adopt that and get it into your workflow, from not only a sales and marketing perspective, but also underwriting. We're seeing that a lot on, spreadsheet work is becoming a lot easier to be done. And I mean, they can, where you can pop in a spreadsheet, it'll do it for you, or it'll give you the formula to do it. I mean, back in the day, that was very, very tough, right? You had to hire people to do some of these things, and so, I think that's important to understand too.
No, I could go, I mean, I'd love to go down the AI rabbit hole here, but like, this is something where I'm constantly pressing my people is like, how can we be more efficient? Good. How can we lean into the AI and things like that? And like, I put posts basically on LinkedIn. I had some guy that kept poking fun at me. It was a prospect because he could tell that I used ChatGPT to reformat my email, and you have the infamous dashes when you use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so it's seemingly obvious. And like my whole thing is, there are going to be two camps of people, like in any professional service space. One is people that get on the train, the other is people that don't get on the train, right? And like, you don't want to be stuck riding the horse when your competitors could be in the Lamborghini. And like AI helps you get to the Lamborghini. The question is what that looks like. So
Matthias, I'm going to dive into some of the cool stuff. Now that I know you're not a banker, I mean, you're a past banker. Let's get into the stuff where I think our listeners really have those questions, which are like, I've got a home equity line of credit that I want to tap to buy my SBA loan, right? What are the ways to get through those things? The other one is I think one of the biggest ones is SBA has made so many recent changes, right? I've noticed myself, I have a relationship that I put through one of my bank friends. He just told me, he's like, SBA is slower. He's like, they gutted the SBA. And so rules, regs, you also have all these other challenges that are happening inside of the SBA, right? So my big question is like, what are those like, hey, I posted this on Twitter and I got so much feedback. What are a couple of those that you did that were just like I think the home equity line is a great one. I think that is a great angle. Or like, hey man, like how do I get 0% down? How do I structure it?
Yeah.
And by the way, I wouldn't ever suggest it. Because leverage is at 10.25 interest rates. I don't think I would leverage like that. But the point is, people are trying to be creative. And it sounds like you're a creative person that was in a bank that's not creative. And they're like, hey, and I get it. I actually agree with the bank. Like that does put a lot of liability on. But now you're a free man. So what are some of those tricks and tips that you can give our guys that are listening, guys and gals that are going, man, I need to know this SBA process?
Yeah, so a few different things. So like, so one is if you're currently in the trenches and like once you own a business, the sea or the ocean just gets easier, right? Like you're in the arena, you're holding the sword, metaphorically speaking. So if you currently are fortunate enough to own a business now and things are going well, if you want to do kind of a roll-up strategy, the buy then build play, let's say that you're in Dallas, Texas, where I am now is at the time of this podcast, and you own an HVAC business and you want to buy another one. Basically, if you're willing to have your current HVAC business be a co-signer or co-borrower on the acquisition loan, on the SBA 7A loan for the add-on, and if the ownership group of the business that you're going to buy is the same as the one that you have now, and if it's in the same driving distance, same geographic radius, you can do the 0% down because that qualifies as the expansion acquisition. But the multiple has to be low enough to make that work. And like I can't do math in my head. I've never been good at that. You kind of have to pop into a spreadsheet if you're me. But basically, if the numbers work, the cash flow of your current company can gets woven into the global cash flow for the underwriting for that. So yeah, that'd be the first one.
No, that's great. And that kind of brings up the thing for, people that are doing an SBA loan. I mean, they are going to look at your global cash flow, right? That is a big deal. Most people don't realize that they're going to look at you personally. But if you own 3 or 4 pieces of real estate, and if you have this and you have that, all of that gets bulked in to cover that debt service, correct?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's unpack that, right? Because I mean, I had heard about that maybe from you a few years ago. I was like, what the heck is that? I mean, I've done commercial real estate, and they never talk about that, right? It's all about personal liquidity and net worth, and that type of stuff, because they're underwriting the underlying cash flows of the company, right? But you're saying that they're going to take everything that you own, right, as a way to cover the new debt, right? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so if you own, let's say, Ben, that you own that existing HVAC business, and if you want to do the 0% down specifically, you have to have that company be a co-signer on the loan for the purchase of deal number 2. Now, if you can come up with a 10% down independently, and you don't need to do the 0% down thing, you can basically keep those two businesses siloed separately from each other. Some banks might want to grab a corporate guarantee from the first business because that enables them to factor in the global cash flow with pulling in the financials of deal number 1 to deal number 2. But that's a bank discretion thing. That's not an SBA mandate.
But let's be honest, they're going to ask for it. So let's get to that point. Like
Right.
I mean, I've done hundreds of
Right.
these loans, brokering, doing those things. The bank is going to ask for every PG of everything you own, everything like that. So at Pioneer, are you helping your clients avoid like going, hey man, you don't have to push back or any of that stuff?
Yeah. So we like if we're working with someone, Casey, we tell the client to push back when there's an opportunity to push back. And so sometimes, like if the bank comes back with a ridiculous ask, because we're in this position where like the person we're working with is our client, and we're trying to advocate for them, but we're also trying to maintain the relationship with the bank. And at times that things can get adversarial, situationally depending, not typically. So sometimes we'll tell the client, hey, this like what the banker is asking you for is discretionary. Tell the banker that you check the SBA guidelines, and this isn't a mandate. And like we'll just tell them what's right back in an email, kind of thing. So.
Yep. No, that's great stuff because there's a lot to it. I think everybody thinks SBA is just like walk in, get a loan, and you're out the door. Man, you've got to have your stuff. I mean, so one of the clients I helped in the past, they had submitted their financials for 2024, their P&L. They were on a cash basis. Obviously, when they file their tax returns, they file on a cash basis, but their reporting is on an accrual basis. And at the beginning of the year, they made them go back and basically redo the financials with their CPA to show the cash basis of the year to date opposed to as their accrual. And man, it took a long time. Like it takes a long time for an entrepreneur to go, what? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
But there are these things, right, that I think like when someone works with you or a group like yours, this is where that upfront scrubbing is really going to help, right? Is that before it ever gets put in the bank hopper, right?
Right.
You guys have enough knowledge on your funnel to say, hey, we're going to scrub this thing. We're going to get it to where when we hit submit, we're 90% of the way there.
Yeah. And that's the thing we try to do, Casey. So like if, let's say hypothetically you're coming to us, you have a business you're looking at and you haven't shipped off the LOI yet, but you've have started negotiations. You want to figure out, will the structure work that you're contemplating, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we'll get involved and kind of roll up our sleeves, because what we don't want, because it reflects badly on us, is to take someone on and then the deal is just not fundable, because that's just a waste of everyone's time involved. So just pop in super quick, Ben. So one interesting piece of knowledge for anyone watching this podcast with the new guideline changes, and this actually came up with a client I'm working with now, is if you're buying a business post June 1st, when the SBA guidelines change, and if your seller wants to keep equity in the business, they have to personally guarantee the SBA loan. Now, the second nuance to that is if you're raising equity in the seller, so like you're going out to the market of equity investors to come up with a down payment, and if the seller's rolling equity so that they're giving the cap table, the investors have to be co-borrowers on the deal.
I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. I'd heard that first part, right? Where they, if there's a seller note that they have to PG it, which I think is pretty heavy handed, because you're no longer having control over the business, but yet you want me to guarantee it, but so let's unpack that second point, because I think that's important. A lot of people,
and not the seller note. What he's saying is the rollover equity. If I want you to stand for 20%.
Yep.
If you want to stand for 20%, you've got a PG.
Well, I thought he was talking about. I thought you were mentioning, Matthias, that like if you're raising money, that the people that you're raising money for also have to sign.
So like, so if Casey wants to buy Ben's plumbing, and Ben's going to keep 10% of Ben's plumbing, Casey's going to buy 90%. But in order for Casey to do the deal, Casey needs to go to the ocean of investors to raise equity. The people in the cap table from the ocean investors that are going to own part of Ben's plumbing have to be co-borrowers on Casey's SBA loan.
So are they co-guarantors, or are they just
not co-guarantors, just co-borrowers? So,
but I mean, like that's, if I'm an investor, that still gives me pause, right? Like maybe I don't have to personally guarantee anything, but you're still signing on something outside of investing, right?
Yeah,
So I think,
like your name or entity name or whatever is like on the loan documents. So
yeah.
and I'm not an attorney. When I worked in the SBA banks, I never worked on like the workout side. So I don't know specifically as far as what the legal implications are there. Could the banks try to go after the investors or whatnot? But it's something that just throws like an added unnecessarily monkey wrench in the whole process,
And I
basically.
would say, okay, so if you're having somebody sign on something, there's a reason that you have that. There's some amount of hook into them, and if you're a lender, the SBA or even any other lender, right? It's because if something goes wrong, goes sideways, they want to be able to go after and try to get right the ship, so to speak.
So let's run some scenarios here because this is a good one. So what if the investment group was an entity, right, that was syndicated, right? So let's say it's Joe's, or let's just say it's entity 1, 2, 3, and you syndicate $1 million in that from a group of investors, right? And that's going to be the investment into the new project. So on the documents, right, the borrower is me. So Casey's now the borrower, and I own 81% of the business, right? So on paper, I own 81%. Yep. My 19% is XYZ Corp business, and that's where I got my $1 million, right? So in that structure, you're saying that everybody in XYZ, all the investors that syndicated, would have to be on the loan documents as signers.
Not in that structure. Just to clarify, Casey, would your seller there be retaining any ownership or no?
Yeah, no. Seller would not retain anything. We're buying it out, completely buyout. And I'm going to go raise $1 million from my partners so I can close on the business with working capital and all the stuff I need.
Yeah. So in that structure, the answer is no. The only things of your investors would be they would need to provide the bank with, their names, whatever at the beneficial ownership levels needed to go into the SBA system just for KYC stuff.
Yeah,
so they won't be on the loan. And then you would need to have in your operating agreement or shareholder agreement that they're basically acknowledging that you can take out the SBA loan borrowing for whatever amount, because that allows you to avoid getting the acknowledgement and consent in the loan agreement with the bank where they have to sign on the specific pages. So I actually just had this.
What you just said. So in the operating agreement, right? So for our listeners, I would say almost everybody that's listening that's going to buy a business, there's a few of them that are going to do it all out of their own pocket, but almost everybody's going to try to raise from 5, 10, 15 people, right, to close. So let's do a true example. It's a $3 million business, and I've got to come up with 10%, right? So I've got to come up with $300,000. So I create entity that's I'm going to raise money from. Those investors are going to have ownership in that entity, which is going to have cash flow rights in the business. The person that's raising the money is going to be the guarantor, and they're going to own at least 81% of the business.
So it doesn't need to. Okay, so it doesn't need to be at least
anything under 19% doesn't have to have a PG.
Yeah. So the person that's the buyer, Casey, doesn't have to have at least 81%. It's that any investor, if you pierce back on the beneficial level, the individual investors, no one can have more than 19%. Like each individual person has to be below 20. And so depending on the size of the deal, like I've seen deals recently where a guy owned like 60% of the business because there's just a massive equity raise, like big transaction. But typically on most of these SBA deals, I'd say it's fairly uncommon for the sponsor, like in this hypothetical case, you to own, let's say, less than like 70 or 75%, give or take.
Gotcha. And real quick, I mean, we dive deep on SBA stuff. I mean, I think but I think the interesting part of your story, Matthias, is really kind of the unlocking the world of X, right? And the formerly known as Twitter for everybody that's not familiar with what the heck I'm talking about.
I know.
Talk to me about you said that you had gotten put onto it. I forgot the gentleman's name, but and then you kind of just started posting. Like, did you have any kind of agenda, or were you just kind of posting your own thoughts? And And then how are you now kind of being more methodical about it to grow your followers and drive those leads to your company at this point?
Yeah, so back when I started, Ben, I was just posting on like anything that was topically useful that I thought for business buyers. So like the thing on the home equity line of credit. I think I did a thread on business plans, fundamentals of business plans, what banks want to see. Same thing with projections. I think I did one on requirements for lease agreements and SBA loans, landlord subordination agreements, things like that. And then people would comment on them, and sometimes they'd have specific questions, and then they'd reach out and hit me up with a DM. So that was kind of the initial what I was doing back when I was at the SBA banks, or back when I was at First Business Bank. And then now what I'm doing is kind of similar to that, is trying to find specific topics or like things that are becoming problems in deals. So working capital true-ups, add backs, how to think about add back intensive deals, why you should like always get a line of credit at the time that you buy the business, and how much it sucks if you don't get it at the time you buy the business, things like that. And then trying to write on those topics specifically, and then basically including a call to action to the round robin Calendly for Pioneer or for my Calendly to schedule calls with people to meet with them, get them pre-qualified by issuing a financial letter of support. So essentially, if someone has at least $100,000 of liquidity across cash and taxable stocks, they have a good resume with management experience and profit and loss experience, and at least a 680 credit score, and they're willing to provide us the completed SBA personal financial statement and the supporting documentation, we'll put together what we call a financial letter of support to basically give them validation when they go to the ocean of sell-side brokers that they're SBA pre-qualified. Nice. And so that's kind of what we're doing now. And then outside of that, like every once in a while, posting like the shock and awe type tweets, like this is what, in true stories. So for example, one was a guy that ended up refinancing out the debt on his landscaping company with a top 10 SBA bank, or using that bank to do the refinance, from a bank based in Texas that basically decided that they were going to call his SBA line of credit due because they wanted to pull out the SBA space. Just crazy things like that. And like just telling people, diligence your bank, right? Like find out how many SBA loans do they do? What does the process look like? Go on the SBA scoreboard or SBA lender rankings list, poke and prod around. Like don't just go down the street to Ben, the community banker that is looking to do his first SBA deal, and go with that just because you want to play golf with Ben, right? Like do your homework, do your diligence, make sure the bank actually works in the space.
Yeah. So are you now posting on behalf of your company, or are you posting on behalf of yourself personally, or what's the strategy, or is it all?
Well, once we get your Twitter information, I'm gonna be following you because this is good stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end we'll have you drop your handle too, right?
Yeah, kind of a little bit of both, Ben. So like I think my current following on my Twitter is around 32,000, give or take. My company one's just a tad below 4,000. So I've been using my personal Twitter and then occasionally linking back to the company one. I really do need to do a good job at beefing up the company Twitter. One of the things I'm trying to do now, and this is a good problem, but a problem nonetheless, is to make it where when people think about Pioneer, it's not like they think about me and then I'm the go-between to Pioneer. In the same way, like, if you're going to go buy an iPhone, not to compare myself to Apple, you're not thinking about Steve Jobs or Tim Cook on the way to the Apple store. Like maybe you are, but like you're just thinking about getting the phone and using the phone because you want the iPhone 15 or 16. That's what I'm trying to do now by like making it so like people just think about the service offering and they don't think like, they have to first reach out to me to get to the service offering, and making them comfortable working directly with my team.
Love it.
It's beautiful, man. That's a great breakthrough. So we are now going to jump into our rocket round. Matthias, this has been great, man. And now we want to know a little bit more details about you. So For our listeners, we always do a rocket round. We like to know 3 major questions. So first question, what do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, so free time, Casey, I've been trying to improve in my golf game. So I joined a country club at the start of last year. I'm an ideas person where sometimes like my idea there was spend a lot of money, have that motivate me to get good at golf, and then getting busy running a business. Things don't always go as you plan. So I've been taking golf lessons every weekend. Started a couple weekends ago. Trying to get out and get as good as I can at that. Just since one, it's just a super fun activity. Yep. 2, it's a good business development activity and kind of just helps blow off smoke. Outside of that, traveling, so doing a trip up to Door County, Wisconsin with my wife, middle of August, going to Canada, 3rd week of August to visit relatives. And then my wife and I are actually expecting our first kid in January.
Exciting.
So doing a baby moon trip in the fall to Jamaica. So
I just want to break it to you, man. I want to be completely honest. Your golf game's going to go to shit once you have the baby. Because your wife is going to kill you if you were at the golf course for 5 hours playing golf. I'm just telling you. I've been married 20 years. I'm being honest.
We got a couple kids, and I think he's definitely true. You'll eventually get back out there, but I think the first few months you might not want to bring that up, or if you do, you got to do it very carefully. Make sure she's had a good night's sleep. So all right, well that's great stuff. So all right, so second question of the rocket round here. So most memorable moment in your business journey so far.
Yeah, most memorable moment, I would say last year was crossing $1 million of revenue. And then if I had to pick a second most memorable moment, I would say it was closing my first loan, which was middle of September of 2022. So about 4.5 months into running Pioneer. And so, I mean, basically going from a job where I was making approximately $90,000 a year to essentially working 4.5 months, making zero, and then making, I think it was like $10,300. It's exciting, right? It's like there's something here to this. So
yeah, there's this book. I think it was J. Paul Getty. His autobiography says profits are better than wages. So one of the books I read at a very early age, and I was like, man, damn it.
It feels good. It feels good. Well, it feels good when a plan comes together, right?
Yeah.
You're really burning the ships. You're like, hey, you're stepping back from corporate America. I'm going to try my own thing. You're not quite sure. Your wife's probably like, you're crazy. You're not going to make anything. And then 3 or 4 months go by, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make anything. And then you finally do make something. It's very validating as an entrepreneur. And I think everybody listening to this just needs to realize that we've all been there. Yeah. We've had those long nights where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work. Maybe I have to go back and get a job again. And I just,
every Wednesday for me.
I just encourage everybody to be like Matthias and just stick with it, right? Believe in yourself, back yourself. And ultimately it works out.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What is your favorite tool or resource? And I think I can answer this one for you, but
right. Yeah. So I'll skip the ChatGPT. So I would say favorite tool currently is Claude. So kind of similar to ChatGPT, but like, it's more, I'd say analytical. It does a better job at writing. So, let's say, for example, you're working with a client and you're trying to give them feedback on a business plan or structuring it. It just does a better job at really kind of going in depth and just doing more kind of like outline format. So I've really leaned into that from a standpoint of like putting together SOPs for my team, giving clients feedback on things, and then also just structuring thoughts for kind of longer form writing.
And so you said Cloud or Claude?
Claude, Claude, Claude.
All right, I've never heard of that one. All right, so that's
first.
I thought you were going to say X, man, but all right, we'll go.
That was my guess.
All right, we got another. So for our listeners, there's another tool, and me and Casey haven't heard of that one either. So that's a new. I think we have to continue to keep our ears to the ground on the AI space. It's ever evolving, and there's a lot of great tools out there.
So Matthias, I just want to say, hey, why don't you tell people how they can get in contact with you? Give them your stuff. We're gonna also drop them in the show notes, man. And this has been incredible.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the chat, and I think it really shows. your entrepreneurial journey, which is what I was expecting from today's show, you know, and the power of social media, which was awesome too. So I think it was a great show. But yeah, drop not only your contact info, but also your handle on X, just so people can follow you as well.
Yeah, no, first and foremost, thank you, Casey and Ben, for having me. So best way for anyone watching this to get in touch is either via email. So my first name, Matthias, M-A-T-T like Matt, and then H-I-A-S at pioneercap.com, pioneercap.com, or LinkedIn, first name, last name on LinkedIn, or Twitter, now X, and that's SBA _ Matthias is my handle.
Love it.
Fantastic. Well, again, man, thank you for coming here, sharing your story, and for those listeners, you know who to reach out when you have a lot of these questions.
All right. Thanks, Matthias.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys.
We appreciate it, buddy.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.